Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
We talked about George Heye this week, the mixed bag that is George Heye.
Yeah.
He's a mixed bag, as I said, but I have fun things to start with. So early on in talking about George Heye, we talked about his senior thesis being about organic oils used as lubricants.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that George and his collaborator Paul did as part of their tests, and I am doing the air quotes, was to lightly coat the inside of a growler keg with oil and fill it.
Okay.
And they realized that when they did this, they could fill the keg with more beer because it didn't get as sudsy.
It doesn't foam? Okay.
And they apparently ran this test a lot.
Okay.
So I love the idea that these two college seniors had figured out a way to game the keg system.
Yeah.
It sounds very, very much in line with the way you would think that two college students would operate, but I like that they applied science to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is also a funny question mark write-up about his wife Blanche as all of the bad press was happening during their divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Blanche really did like smoking. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously smoking is bad. Don't smoke. But like they were noting how much she spent on cigars and cigarettes as like this big gotcha thing. And there's one article where it's a picture of her and she's talking about how smoking seems perfectly delightful and sensible. She'd only started doing it recently. But to her, the reason that you should smoke is that it's the polite thing to do.
Okay.
If you're in someone's home and they offer you
such
a thing, you should always take it. You're just being polite. And I'm like, that is at the time, I'm sure it seemed very interesting and delightful and exactly in line with social mores. But today, it's like reading that, I was like, that's not polite. One of the other things that came up that was just like a weird factoid.
Yeah.
Was that after George's death, like that period between when he passed and when the Smithsonian acquired the museum was really fraught. Like there was a lot of fancy footwork going on to keep the finances to a point where they could keep it existing at all and keep the collection together. And one of the things that they did that almost happened was that Ross Perot might have been a potential buyer.
What?
On the one like deal point that the collection would have to move to Texas.
Okay.
Which of course was in George's will that they couldn't.
Right.
At least a significant part of it had to stay in New York because he wanted to serve New Yorkers, granted rich white businessman New Yorkers, but still. Yeah. So that fell apart.
I have absolutely zero surprise with the idea that if Ross Perot was going to buy it, it had to move to Texas.
Yeah, none whatsoever. But what a weird, strange thing. You and I had talked about a little bit like the legislation about repatriation.
Yeah. So we've talked about NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. I might have gotten some of those letters mixed up. We've talked about it a number of different episodes. Most recently on Unearthed, we talked about the new final rule on how it's to be implemented. In all of that, if I realized that NAGPRA didn't apply to the Smithsonian, that didn't stick into my head.
Well, I have more information for you.
Yeah, I know there's different legislation. That's the legislation when they bought it, like that this other legislation applies to the Smithsonian. You go ahead, though.
My understanding reading about that legislation was that was part of what catalyzed NAGPRA.
Oh, really?
And so it's kind of a matter of like Smithsonian has this set up already. We need to legislate to make sure other museums kind of fall under it. So I'm not sure if it's a case where the language of it excluded the Smithsonian just because it seemed like they were already on top of it. Or for some other reason. I haven't read through that legislation closely in a long time.
I can see it potentially causing confusion or problems.
Oh, yeah.
If newly written legislation applied to the Smithsonian that already had specific legislation about the same subject.
Yeah.
I have not been to the museum. So there's still a Museum of the American Indian in New York. That's still there. I did not know until this episode why that was, because if you've been to Washington, D.C., like that's where all the Smithsonians are.
Yes.
And that is where there is a Museum of the American Indian that I've been to a couple of times. And I did not, I was always like, that's weird that there's also another one in New York. And that's why we've just talked about.
Yes. Now you know.
I will say at this point, and I'm just going to say, I know there are people who were at the end of their patience before I was born. But for me, having worked on this podcast now for 11 years, almost, I'm just like super at the end of my patience regarding museums and their repatriations.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, give it back. And I have very little flexibility in that. I'm like, if a colonized people who were subjected to an attempt of genocide says that's ours, give it back, then give it back. And I have really no arguments of like, oh, but our study. I'm like, I don't give it back. It wasn't yours. Give it back.
Right.
And also some of the things that we talk about on Unearthed that are like new research that's being done. And it's like unclear whether there's permission involved of like the indigenous people whose history this is about. Sometimes, we'll get emails from folks who are like, well, yeah, the researchers have a plan to give this nation everything once they're done with this research. And I'm like, well, but this nation might want that to stay in the ground, right? So anyway, that's my frustration with all of this.
Yeah. We
might get angry letters from museum curators and anthropologists, and I'm still like, we had guests on the show some years ago from the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology, and this was they were very kind to us. They were generous with their time and all of that. And then it has seemed like in the years since we did this, there's just been a series of horrors and announcements about things in the Peabody Museum's collection.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm so tired of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop doing it and give it back.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's one of those things. This is an exception to one of my personal life rules. Because I have a personal rule to never tell anybody else how to do their job.
Okay.
Because it happens to us all the time. It happens to everybody. Where some random person who doesn't understand the way like somebody's industry works, who is like, you could just do this. And it's like, no.
Yeah. I also find this very frustrating.
So I like I said, I have a personal rule. I don't presume I know more than like, anybody, but like, you see it a lot in fandoms of various flavors where they think like my favorite entertainer should just do this, or they should, or this movie should have done this. And I'm just like, none of you have the right to do this.
Yeah. Or they'll get like the imagined backstory that a person has made about what they think is happening that doesn't actually have to do with that person's work reality at all.
100%. But this is the one place where I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
This is a problem.
Yeah.
Especially because when you read about many of these, it's like, there's no urgency.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a repatriation request has been made by a nation or a people. And then it seems like that gets taken in and there's an initial statement given about like, we're working on this project. And then it's like years go by.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
I understand you have a lot of things going on, but surely righting a wrong of this magnitude would get pushed to the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm wrong and I'm being completely contradictory in my own policy, but this is the one space where I feel like, no, I'm with you. Give it back. Give them their stuff. Oh, you stole my thing because you want to study it? Neat. It's still my thing.
Yeah, give it back.
I mean, if you simplify it that way and let's say for the sake of argument, it's some random possession of a person that they love or has meaning to them.
Right.
and someone just took it and they're like, no, but I'm going to study it. And it's like, well, yeah, but you stole it.
Right.
Like this would be an open and shut case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some of the, like, this is why that so much work was done to like reissue the new rule about NAGPRA, which again does not apply to the Smithsonian. This whole episode is about Smithsonian, but one of the reason was that there were so many loopholes and so many things that museums could do to be like, oh, we're evaluating this, and like not actually take action. And some of the things that would come up as reasons to not repatriate things were actually dealt with in the legislation. Like sometimes, especially when we're talking about like human remains from very, very long ago, there might be more than one nation that feels a tie to these remains, right? There was already language about how to deal with that. But sometimes the response would be sort of like, well, there's two different claims. We don't know what to do. We'll just keep it. And I'm very tired of it.
Do you want to shift gears to a history mystery
Let's do that.
It's gossipy.
Because I feel like I'm just ranting now. And a rant that's going to upset people.
This won't upset people, I don't think.
Okay.
It like I said, it's gossip. So this is very interesting because I ran into this weird stumbling block where I knew George Heye had been married 3 times, and I was trying to find information about his third wife because Blanche obviously is documented. Thea is pretty well documented because she was so involved with his work and was really like a collaborator. His last wife is like this blip, and I'm like, okay, but who was she? Where was she from? What is this? And like part of the problem, I think, is that there may have been some confusion and maybe a cover-up about their relationship.
Whoa!
Because in that 1958 biography we read several passages from by Mason, who was a friend and like knew George Heye personally, he mentions that his third wife was Jessica Peebles Standing.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I'll look for that name. Now, it's possible, too, that he just got some things conflated or wrong. Because when I started looking for variations of the name Jessica Peebles, Jessica Standing, Jessie Standing, etc., I found several news articles that list her as George's sister.
Okay.
Including one that is from the Los Angeles Times when he is out in LA. And it says Dr. George G. Heye and his sister, Mrs. J. Standing, were among the Easterners sojourning at the El Mirador Hotel and having a dinner dance. And I'm like, was he traveling with the woman he was romantically involved with and just telling people it was his sister? Because, yuck, for a variety of reasons. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think about divorce ranches where they would be kind of doing a similar thing, but they would go a little farther removed than a sibling. So I'm like, there's just something really icky about it. Or did he have a sister that was, I don't know. It's unclear to me. I never found enough info. Maybe his sister was married to someone related to this person. I don't know.
Okay.
But I was like, this woman is a bit of a mystery, and she kind of vanishes after the Nevada divorce ranch time.
Yeah.
Whew.
Wow.
George.
Wow.
And he was quite, he was on in years at that point. So part of me wonders if she, who was a good bit younger than him, maybe married him thinking she would get financial gain out of it, and then found him to be a work-obsessed pain in the neck and was like, not worth it. I don't know what happened there, but it was not a good marriage. Anyway, that's our gossipy history mystery. What was the scoop with George and Jessie? Why was someone who sounds like her being introduced as his sister?
Yeah.
Anyway, George Heye, you complicated thing. The other thing I didn't put in the outline, but I mentioned it to you offhandedly, is because I couldn't corroborate it, obviously, was that he apparently would tell his chauffeur that he wanted to drive, and he was a very reckless driver, and it scared everyone. And sometimes this has been mentioned in articles where it's like, oh, he's a wacky, flamboyant rich guy who collected a lot of cool stuff. And it's like, that could kill people. I'm not into that. I don't know if I'm just too, this is the one place where I play it very safe, but
Yeah.
like, drive responsibly and be careful in traffic. Anyway.
This week on the show, we talked about Maria Orosa and banana ketchup. I have a number of stories to tell with this episode. The first one is because banana ketchup is the thing that she's just, I think, most associated with today. And banana ketchup also a thing that has a place in the hearts of a lot of people from the Philippines, or a lot of people who are like Filipino American, or, have family who are from there.
Mhm.
Importance of banana ketchup. I wanted to see what banana ketchup was like. And so I had a whole plan where I was going to get on the train and I was going to go down to H Mart and buy some banana ketchup. Turns out our commuter rail was being replaced by shuttles over the weekend. So I made a different plan, which was to go to a different place called Super 88 in Malden, Massachusetts. And in addition to buying banana ketchup at Super 88, I bought like 2 big bags full of other stuff.
Yeah.
Some of which was stuff that we legitimately needed, and some of it was just stuff that I know we like and we haven't had in a while, or stuff that just looked good. So the variety of banana ketchup that I bought was labeled spicy, which I didn't notice when I got it. And I don't know offhand if there was also a regular version there on the shelf. If there had been, I would have bought them both and compared. This spicy one, though, I really liked a lot. I was a little concerned when I saw the ingredients on it, because one of the ingredients was artificial banana flavoring. And when I was a kid, my dentist, the thing they would use to topically numb your mouth before giving you Novocaine for a procedure was fake banana flavored. And I was like, oh, is this gonna, it did not have fake banana flavor. And it really didn't have anything that I would describe as like Cavendish banana flavor. We said in the episode that the bananas that Maria Orosa was using were Saba bananas, which are like denser, a more flavorful banana, I think. So this to me had a sweeter flavor than tomato ketchup.
Okay. That was my first question.
The banana element to me was closer to like a green banana, like an unripe Cavendish banana, than like a bright yellow Cavendish banana from an American grocery store.
Gotcha.
And it also had a tanginess that I really like. And of course, spicy, with a spicy level that I would say about as spicy as sriracha sauce.
Gotcha.
Which I know these are two totally different sauces, but like that was to a comparable spicy level to me. And I ate that on some scalloped potatoes that Patrick made, and I ate it on some French fries that I got with my dinner. And then Patrick used it last night in a sauce for what he made for dinner. All of these things were very good. I was very into it. It is thicker and more gelatinous than tomato ketchup, the one that we got anyway.
How would you compare it to the flavor? Because this is a thing I have never had. Okay. How would you compare it to like the flavor of like a plantain?
Maybe some plantain similarities. It's hard for me to conceptualize because most of the plantains I have eaten have been fried.
Right.
Which is just a very different mouthfeel.
Right.
From a sauce. But yeah, I thought it was very tasty. Patrick was also very into it. Patrick actually lived in Manila for a month when we were first dating.
I remember.
And he does not remember having any banana ketchup while he was there. I think it's possible that there were bottles of banana ketchup in restaurants and things that he didn't necessarily notice that was what he was getting. But anyway, I was very into the banana ketchup. I did not try to make any Filipino spaghetti. But everything about the Filipino spaghetti recipes that I have seen, I'm on board with all of this. So at some point in the future, there may be a little Filipino spaghetti experiment at my house.
I love an experiment. I love a food experiment. One of the things that tickled me at the very beginning of this episode, and it tickles me only because it has come up in my brain a lot lately, is when you were mentioning that there's a lot of overlap with other stuff we have done.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like we have reached a point where we have done, more than 10 years of this, of just us, and even prior. It's almost impossible anymore to find a topic that doesn't interlock with other stuff we've talked about. I'm sure there are some out there, but in a way, I kind of love it because we're putting together. I have often talked when people talk about like how we put episodes together, like when we're doing live shows or whatever. That's a question we get a lot about how, to me, it's almost like, shaking up a puzzle box and throwing it on the table, and then you figure out how all the pieces fit together. But I feel like on kind of a meta version of it and the bigger level of world history, we're doing the same thing with all of the episodes we do, where we're seeing all of the connections and nexus points throughout history. And I just like it. That's all.
Yeah. When I was writing the introduction to the episode, originally I was naming the prior episodes that this seemed particularly closely connected to. And then the intro was so long that I was like, this episode is already trending toward the longer side. I got to take some of this out. We don't need to name all of the past episodes.
Yeah, it's it grows and grows.
So the other little adventure I had was a telephone adventure. So we mentioned that this collection of her recipes was published first back in 1970 with a niece spearheading all of this. And I had a scan of what I think was the 1998 reprint of that.
Gotcha.
I went to try to find the 2020, the 50th anniversary one.
Yeah.
So that is called Appetite for Freedom, the recipes of Maria Orosa. And I did not get a copy of this book. I was not finding, number one, no ebook of it, no like US seller that seemed to have it. I looked in WorldCat, and when I first looked in WorldCat, there were 3 libraries in the United States that had a copy of this book. In a weird coincidence, when the weekend passed and I came to work on Monday for the next step of this story, and I went back to WorldCat, there were 4 copies of this in libraries in the United States. One of them not processed enough to be able to check it out yet. So when I first looked at the 3 libraries in the United States that had copies of this book were the Library of Congress, Yale University, and Morrill Memorial Library in Norwood, Massachusetts. Wildly enough, that library is part of the Minuteman Library Network, which is one of the library cards I have. So I could have requested a copy of this book and had it delivered to a branch that's actually close to me. Norwood is not. Norwood is like an hour in the car, 2 hours on trains from my house. And it was, if I had requested it, it would not have arrived in time for me to still do the episode. I would have had to find something else to talk about and move this one until later. So I called the library and I talked to the reference librarian because I was like, hey, there's there's 4 copies of this book in the United States in libraries, and one of them is your library. Do you know if there's a story there? Like, is there maybe a book plate inside saying that somebody donated it to the library? And this very gracious reference librarian put me on hold and went to the shelf and looked at it for me. And there was not a book plate in it, but there was a handwritten note saying that it had been a gift to the library. So I am assuming that there is someone locally to Norwood who either has connections to the family, connections to her, an interest in the Philippines, is Filipino, interested in some reason to have donated this book to the library. I don't know what that reason is. bless this librarian for humoring my curiosity to go look at a book on the shelf for me. Thank you very much for doing that. I'm curious about what the story is there, and I don't know.
They may also just be like a foodie.
Totally. That's the thing that, yeah.
Or I know from my days of working in libraries that cookbooks are one of those things that can often appreciate in value in ways that other books may not, because most of them get kind of trashed because they're
use them
covered in, drips of broth and flour smears and butter and whatnot. So in my head, it's possible that someone maybe had it as part of a collection and then, Yeah,
there was, there are also there are folks who have a particular interest in something who sometimes will leave their local library in their will money to do something with. And I don't remember which episode it was, but there was an episode that we did that involved an artist. And it was not as uncommon in this book, which, 4 copies according to WorldCat in American libraries. But it was one that did not have many copies. But there was one in my actual local branch that I was able to just go walk down there and pick up. And it had a book plate in the front that it had been paid for by somebody who had, been local to the town where I live, who had specifically left money in their will to the library to acquire art books. And I was like, I love this. I love this whole, the fact that somebody felt moved to do that in their will, I really liked. So yeah, if people want more ketchup history, there is an episode of the podcast Sawbones that is all about ketchup. I think it's from about a year ago. I did listen to it when it first came out. I did not re-listen to it when writing the ketchup part of this episode. Yeah.
It made me think about all the wild flavors of, the wild colors of ketchup.
Yeah.
That have been tried by Heinz over the years.
Yeah.
Green ketchup, not made from green tomatoes, just green ketchup.
Yeah, I also found reference to Heinz actually doing a banana ketchup at one point. And I did not, I was like, when exactly was this? And where? So yeah. I also love tomato ketchup. I will just say that. Tomato ketchup on some really good French fries, I'm excited about.
No.
Not for you?
I mean, I don't hate it. It's not like I'm like, blah, blah. But I just, doesn't do a lot for me. I'm like, can we mix this with some mayonnaise, please? Could we? Which I bet banana ketchup mixed with mayonnaise might be interesting. Banana ketchup sounds more interesting to me because I do not care for tomatoes.
Okay. It does not taste like tomatoes at all. So
right. And really,
there are no tomatoes in the one that I got.
Really, tomato ketchup doesn't really taste like tomatoes, but not very much anyway. But yeah, I'm not a big tomato anything person. So
yeah,
I eat them because they're good for me, but I don't like them. And I'm not going to choose it as a condiment.
That's fine.
Banana ketchup.
I will take your little ketchup packets the next time we are traveling together.
Oh, this is dangerous. I'm going to just bring you a suitcase full.
I have a suitcase of leftover ketchup packets from Holly. Speaking of traveling.
Yes.
We do have 2 things coming up. One is a live show.
Yeah.
In Indianapolis, which I should have opened anything about the details of this.
I have them handy.
Great.
That is going to be on July 19th, which is a Friday, at the Eugene and Marilyn Glick Indiana History Center. It starts at 7:30. We are also offering a version of the ticket. You could just get a ticket for the show, or you can get a ticket where you can do a meet and greet with us beforehand. You can get more information about that at indianahistory.org/events.
Yeah. And then the other travel is a little bit farther down the road and farther away from us.
Yes.
Which is that in November, we are going to Iceland.
So excited.
Another group trip for listeners of the show. That is November 2nd through 8th, 2024. There is also an optional add-on to that includes an attempt to see the Northern Lights, which we may see the Northern Lights during the regular trip, but this is sort of like a Northern Lights chasing event, and I think also a whale watch.
Yes.
So those are things that can be added on. So you can find out about that trip at defineddestinations.com. We are very excited about that. So you'll probably hear it again.
Yes.
Yeah. So happy Friday. Whatever's happening on your weekend, I hope it's great. If you love banana ketchup, I hope you have access to it where you live. That you can make delicious things to eat with it. You can expect a Saturday classic from us tomorrow and something brand new on Monday. Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.